Yeah, Professor Florence Masajewa, a professor of law and, of course, a lecturer. Madam, you're welcome to the program, Africa Discuss.
Thank you very much. Well, I thank God it's a protest, really. So that made it possible for me to be
Yeah, thank
around
you
as
so
it were.
much.
Thank you so much.
I understand your very busy schedule, thank you so
Well, is
much.
it really busy schedule or because of the road? I would have very much loved to be coming,
All right,
but
madam.
the road makes it impossible for
All
me to
right,
do
man.
that.
Then Wita Butako always with us here on the program Africa Discourse, an international conflict resolution expert, a serial author, and when it comes to issues like what is going on in Nigeria, the protests, and in some parts of Africa continent, Wita Butako has, a way, he has ways to prefer solutions, but only that somehow it is believed that the governments of the day may not listen to suggestions as most times. All right, so Nowita Gutako, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so gentleman and lady here, it is no gainsaying anymore that we've been seeing, policies on the continent of Africa. Of course, the way they've been impacting on the citizens, government policies. The one that we can readily recall now, it's Nigerians had to file out, for the fifth day now, protesting government policies, the removal of fuel subsidy, the hunger issue in the country, the hardship issue in the country. And of course, we also saw the one that happened in Kenya about 2, 3 weeks ago. Then even in Gambia, we saw pockets of protests too. All these, point to the fact that government policies in these countries are not friendly to the people. Professor Masajua, what is your impression? What are your impressions about the kind of policies we're talking about now in Africa?
Well, it's unfortunate. I don't know whether this is a second round of the African Spring, like some people try to dub the fact that it has come to Nigeria, especially given that the civil populace, hitherto people think we are very docile. Whatever the government gives, irrespective of how, unbecoming, Nigerians will accept it. So I'm sure the world is surprised. And I'm not surprised. The Nigerians are not surprised because when you push somebody to the wall, it's either she or he breaks the wall and falls off, or you bounce back and attack the forces that are pushing you steadily towards the wall. And this exactly is what is happening in Nigeria. So policies that will make it inimical for you to, for instance, afford the most basic thing that would ensure your existence, that's food, would certainly provoke a situation where you bounce back. And that's what the world is experiencing. That contrary to whatever they were thinking, Nigerians at a point were referred to as the happiest people. I don't know if Nigerians are still maintaining the number one position as the happiest people in the world, going by those index. Okay. So, and you can see the first instance of these reactions to policies and maybe programs started from the Francophone countries. And then their reaction was by way of coup plots, coup taking place and replacing those governments they thought were casting or foisting unpopular programs or popular policies on them. The Francophone countries, the Anglophones are reacting to, are responding to poor policies. If you look at it, Nigeria, yes, Nigeria has joined the league now. Kenya, Uganda, okay?
Yeah.
Yes, those places are in turmoil now.
Yeah.
Uganda, then Ghana is warming up. And one thing I tell our leaders is that the issue of protesting against poor policies certainly should be seen as being infectious. Yes, because you suddenly realize there's no doubt about what's happening in Kenya or what happened in Kenya. I think they are still in the streets. It's not as if they've called it off as it were. Now, may have some effect to the fact that Nigerians are reacting with the kind of full force people came out in the last 5 days. The protest has taken place. So what I know is that there is no way you come up with unpopular policies, take away fuel subsidy just the very first day you were sworn in. Then, of course, as if that's not enough, you will come up with regulations that would, of course, mean some people will not have electricity to even run the basic of things they should be running so as to generate enough income to sustain their livelihoods. Oh, it gets to a point you can't take it. Because as it is now, even as a professor, honestly, my salary has been eroded because things I used to buy. The other day, I think 2 days ago, I was there about, I went to the market. I said, let me even price things. I approached the woman I buy ice fish from. The ice fish I bought last for 400 naira, the piece, very miserable size, now goes for about 2,500. And while I was there, I met a woman who came virtually weeping. Say, begged the woman, say, just give me one for 1,000. That's all I have. And the woman said, if I sell it to you at 1,000, I'll be losing about 1,500. And the woman walked away. For me, I had to do something at that point. Because for that woman, looking at her, she didn't look like the kind of person who would come there to maybe whip up, emotions so as to get some reprieve. Yeah. Certainly, this is a woman who once was comfortable, whose family were feeding, no matter how much they earned. The system was at least comfortable and convenient enough to accommodate them irrespective of the amount of money they earned from the system. Here she was begging for a fish of 1,000, which in the past would be about 200 naira. Now she will buy that fish for 1,000 naira. What else? How about the gari? She's going to buy a cup of gari for 450 naira. Milk cup of gari. She's going to buy a cup of beans, white beans, for 500 naira, the fat ones. Then the small ones, she's going to buy them for about 450 naira a cup. And tell me, when I asked her how many children do you have, she said she has 4. And so 1,000 naira worth of miserable. What size will those children eat? Going by the fact that medically they tell us we should give enough for proteinous sources to our children. Yeah. You can't buy beans, which is a veritable source of protein. You can't buy fish. You can't even buy meat.
Okay. All right.
So such conditions will certainly, even when you don't have the knack, you don't have the nerves for protest to go. In fact, if I had been in her shoes, I'll carry placard, even if it's to stand in front of my house, I'll protest.
Okay. All right. So Professor Florence Masaju was there, trying to talk from her personal experience as a Nigerian. And she started by saying that at times these protests, these reactions can be infectious. And, she was also trying to make an analogy, now trying to say that it's almost an African spree, as we had the Arab spree and all that. Yeah. Now, Nowita Ibutaku, let us look at it one more time. Is it the fact necessarily that perhaps African citizens are not, I don't want to say African citizens, I don't want to make a hasty general statement now, but it appears that the governments of the day in Africa, in these countries now, are not educating the people enough. How do I mean? Now, if you talk about the petroleum subsidy, the fuel subsidy that was removed by the federal government in Nigeria, now, before this time, to a very large extent, fuel subsidy was a big issue. Because a lot of persons were into illegal practices and all that. And the federal government came and told us that, hey, we need to stop these things. And a lot of persons actually said, okay, let us stop, subsidizing fuel. Now, that is that. Now, in Kenya recently, we saw how tax rates increased and all that because of some monies that were borrowed and all that. Now, the government in Kenya had to tell Kenyans that, hey, in order for us to come off all these things, we need to increase tax and all that. So the reactions we saw were protests and all that. Now, the question again, is it a fact that citizens in Africa, are not educated, enlightened enough to see reasons with the government, or just the fact that they want to protest? What do you think is really going on?
My hypnosis on issues like this, I've probably been very clear. We have most African leaders who doesn't have blueprints, no policies, no blueprints to take the people from poverty. Unfortunately, they don't mean well for the people. You just mentioned President William Ruto.
Yeah.
It pains me when things start happening this way. Ruto was about one of the most popular character on the African continent. about a year ago. He was like Jesus Christ to the Kenyans. I use the word Jesus Christ.
In his first tenure, previous tenure, he was good.
You know when he was.
Well, just sworn in.
He just won in.
Just won in
It
first
just
tenure.
won. It was when we were campaigning here for during the last presidential election. It was about the same time he came in. I'm an author. I'm a consultant researcher. I'm current. In fact, in my book, where we are, a corporate Nigerian state, the facts are there. I even mentioned William Ruto. I said Nigerians will look at what Kenyans have just done in Kenya. It's the same Ruto that has turned the table upside down against the people. So the problem has always been African leaders. They are very treacherous. They pretend during electioneering process. I say they are superstars, so to say, agents of change. But when they come to presidential palaces, they start to do something else. So what do we have in Nigeria? What I was trying to talk about whether Nigerians were viewed to be more maybe docile, maybe the spark that occurred in Nairobi seems to have infected us. You see, African leaders is quite unfortunate. In spite of the imperialism, colonialism, that is a different, I mentioned it here, but that's a different thing. But African leaders are not helping matters. Talking of policies. An African leader should be talking of positive policies, not bad policies. But unfortunately, the policies that have been generating, that they've been throwing up, they've been throwing to the people, are policies that are retrogressive to the citizens. Somebody on his date of swearing as president of Nigeria, for instance, May 29, 2023, and I said, just like that, where subsidy is gone, I know the Nigerian character, the manipulation of the system, people capitalize, and that was the beginning of the economic
Hardship.
So to say. Okay, I'm looking for an energy that are better qualified.
Yeah.
Because what we have is not governance. We don't have good governance because the leaders are not pro people. What is the meaning of democracy, madam? What is the meaning of governance? People entrusted power to you on their behalf. Please govern us. But you get to power, you don't care. An issue that is so delicate and sensitive at the fuel subsidy issue, for instance. We don't have any mainstay. The mainstay of economy is petroleum products. The guy just stood up somewhere in Eagle Square and said, "First subsidy is gone." That was the beginning of the tragedy. Nigeria is a tragedy. But I just said, what do we say? Because these issues it makes you go emotional. Because you cannot comprehend what is happening. Instead of Nigeria is a treasure island in the whole world. Africa is a treasure island. Africa is endowed. It's a bottomless pit of resources. What don't we have in Nigeria? It's bad leadership. Leadership that does not reckon with the people, does not reckon with the citizens, cannot carry the citizens along. What is wrong? If President Tinubu, for instance, had entered Aso Rock and stayed maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and said, Nigerians, let's talk. What's the way out? This is my blueprint. But the man just came in and torpedoed the economic situation. He has viciously savaged the economic situation in Nigeria. But that's what people on the street.
Yeah, no, we take
Nigerians on the street, madam.
Yeah.
They are tired. They cannot take care of themselves. They cannot pay school fees. They cannot. Some of us we have cars. Sometimes we ration fuel. We think of how well sometimes we want to go somewhere. We will not go. We say let's use public transport because we have school fees to pay.
The public transit.
No, at least before you even have the public, you will have calculated your money. No matter if you are a professor, madam. Thank you. Some of us are even well paid in what we do. The money cannot go. The inflation is heart-wrenching. I don't know whether there's a language we use. Inflationary trend in Nigeria, in most African countries, is cutthroat. So the leaders are to blame.
All right.
We're talking about policy. Is it not? The policy is not to better the socio-economic situation of the citizen, to take that to the next level. But when there's no good governance, there's no good policy, there's no blueprint. Most of these Africans they don't have blueprint. They don't have blueprint. They waste for Western powers, external forces, to even tell them what to do. It will shock you to know that some of the things President Tinubu has done was teleguided from Washington, from somewhere. Given his background, because the way he came up, the Nigerians did not vote for him. That's my opinion.
Which side has your own opinion when you say
That's my opinion.
Nigerians did not vote for him?
He's annoying.
He has been pronounced the winner.
So,
INEC,
Nigerians on his
conducted the
on the
election.
street. They're on the street in Nairobi.
Yeah.
Ghana is warming up.
Uganda is in turmoil.
Is it Cameroon? One
And
day,
Cameroon is already embroidered in a
one
civil
day
war.
they will kiss somebody
The
and throw that person to the
Ambazonians.
President's palace.
All right. Now,
In Yaoundé.
Professor, let me.
It's annoying.
Professor, you also started by talking about the francophone countries. The reason why we have military, like what happened in Niger recently, military coming into power because of the policies and all that. And you also said that it's also spanning into the Anglophone countries. But with what has been going on in Niger now, Niger somehow dragging to return that country back to democratic rule. Now, do we see a situation whereby, are we not seeing a situation whereby even when this military come on board, they just also try to be there to kind of institutionalize, their own government? Don't you think so?
You see, my idea of democracy is that you should evolve a democratic governance system that suits the peculiarities of your environment. If, for instance, the present popularity of the military governments in Mali, Burkina Faso, I think,
Niger.
and then Niger,
Niger,
and including Guinea.
Guinea is coming.
Guinea-Bissau. No, Guinea-Conakry.
Conakry, yeah.
If the people are enjoying it, for Christ's sake, what's wrong in that? They are transmuting it with, of course, like I said, carrying the people along. Is that not? That was the thesis he presented.
Yeah.
Yes, carrying them become. You see, we want to now bring semblance of democracy to what we are doing. Military, ordinarily, people associate with autocratic, administrative system or whatever. Now we want to democratize. We want to bring some faces, some issues in democracy into our military type of government so as to form our own peculiar democratic culture that, of course, will take care of the very peculiarness or peculiarities associated with our own system, our own people. What is wrong in that? Must it be fashioned that according to some other places where it has worked? So at the end of the day, if your democracy does not put food on the table of the citizens you are leading, for Christ's sake, it has failed.
Yeah, but
So if the military government, military democracy, let them just come up with any contraception, any name that will suit and address those peculiarities I'm talking about. That will be fine.
Some analysts have also said that the kind of military we have now, are different from the military we used to have, say, about 20, 30 years ago.
Every generation will have one thing to say about the past generation. That's it. People have this nostalgia. They say, these people say education 10 years ago. But the quality of education present will address the peculiarities of the present system of things. Are you hearing me? So I'm not one of those given to saying or lampooning the present system of things, or because maybe the generation that enjoyed particular perks think what is happening now is kind of anachronistic or maybe strange to whatever they have enjoyed. To me, that's anachronistic. It's past. It's in the past, and it has addressed the issues of those days. The peculiar things of today must be addressed by issues that will address it. And it must come from the people who are affected directly by some of those things. We are talking about policies of African governments. That's what you're telling us here.
Yeah.
Now, the military government, as far as I'm concerned, with all due respect, this is our own Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the African countries affected, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, with all due respect, look at the roads that have disappeared The federal roads that have gone comatose. Okay, I'm one of those affected by the road system
And we're
because
all
I travel every
yeah,
day.
well, most of us are affected. I mean,
Yeah, you come from the road the government, the state government provides, and then it starts to this place. You come to
not
work.
all the roads
But
are
then I
tarred.
have to go to Abuja, I have to come back, and the road is nothing to write home about. When I took up that job at Edo State University, Zaire, in 2016, going from here, I could leave Okada where I left from, maybe 8 a.m. I'll get there around 10 or maybe 9:30.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I'll transfer whatever it is that took me, then I'll come back. And what was I paying? 2016, 400, we started off with 250 naira. I paid to that bus service, so I fed my also.
From Benin to
BD,
Auchi.
yes, 250. Then before you know it, it went up to 400 naira. As the road depreciated, I saw them increasing to align with the depreciation in the
It's
quality of the
automatic.
roads.
It's automatic.
And then today, what do we pay? 7,000 naira, 8,000, depending on the rush as it were being experienced. And that will tell you incrementally the fact that the so-called democracy is not working for us. And these roads that have depreciated, we know under what regimes these roads came about, were built or constructed. Or some of the grand projects that gives the pride to an average Nigerian, we know under which of these type of regimes, democracy or military, that they were built. So I'm not saying the military is totally good. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not also saying democracy is totally bad. What I'm saying, let's look at the features
The
of the
peculiarity.
military
Yeah.
that is good for us. Then let us, inculcate it. Let us bring into our democratic ideals.
Situation, yeah.
We must not bring American idea of democracy here. It's not working for us. And that's where this conspiracy theory comes
Yeah, it
about,
is.
that they are teleguiding
Teleguided.
successive leaders.
Yes.
They are teleguiding our electoral system to churn out leaders whose interests, contradicts the interest of the average Nigerian for whom this election takes place. And it's not just about Nigeria. This whole thing replicates itself all over Africa.
Africa, yeah.
There's something is wrong with the independence those guys granted these African countries. And that is what we are saying. We must speak out. We must continue to speak out. And how we speak out is the kind of thing we are seeing now. And we expect that responsive government, politicians voted into those places, would listen and then have a rethink and begin to think along the line of what I'm saying now, that we must adopt or generate or evolve a democratic culture that will address the peculiarities in our system.
Okay.
Until that is done, until that, we cannot say we have removed how many people from the position of poverty to position of wealth, which is what China boasts of. The day I went to, I think, which part of the, I went to this place where coronavirus started from.
Okay.
I went, a person, a former student invited me there. Guangzhou, what
Yeah,
is it?
something.
That she's even in Nigeria
Yeah.
now. So what I'm saying is, they will, even the regional governments, they will tell you, you see,
Yeah,
these
yeah.
places, these Morocco residents were predominantly poverty stricken.
All right, so
we have elevated about 10 of them, they are now millionaires.
Yeah,
You
Professor,
see that industry, he produced that industry. He used to live in Morocco.
All right, so
Today,
let's
he's an
take a short pause
industrialist.
now,
Can we say
Prof.
that about Nigeria
Yeah, Professor.
or any of the African countries? No.
Okay. All right. We also have that program in See Africa Discourse on independent television. We are looking at policies on the continent of Africa and, of course, the impact that they have on Africans. We take a short pause now, and when we return, we are going to be looking at if there are alternatives, ways of letting governments know in Africa that their policies are not friendly at all. I think that's what we're going to be looking at now, because from situation report that we gather, most times these protests also do not, all go well. I mean, it's a situation whereby lives are lost and properties are destroyed. So we should begin to look at alternatives whereby citizens can ventilate their reactions against these policies that we are talking about. Then also too, we're going to be asking Professor Masajunwa to let us know maybe ways that other African countries have been doing, giving their policies to their people. Take, for example, in Rwanda, whereby policies are said to be human. We have said that the protests that we currently see on the continent of Africa is kind of having a ripple effect, if you like. Now, a situation whereby it happens, it starts here, and before you know, it starts spreading to all that part. We saw it in Kenya, and Uganda is also have been reported to be protesting against government policies. We're seeing it in Nigeria currently. We also understand that in Ghana, Ghanaians are also flexing because of some government policies that are not people-based in Ghana. One thing that stands is the way, the kind of the aftermath effect that we get to see, in this protest. A situation whereby lives are lost, government properties are destroyed. So we should begin to look at and also trying to see whether we can also begin to look at alternative ways other than protest so that governments in Africa will get to know that these policies are really not people-oriented. Professor Florence, I'll start with you one more time on that. Alternative ways of letting government know that these policies are not people-centered.
Well, I expect after the bunch of protests, because you look at the Arab Spring of, I think the late, was it not the earliest part of this century?
Yeah, Egypt.
Egypt started off in Tunisia, then to Egypt,
at the end of the day.
and then Libya, went to some other parts of the Arab parts of Africa. At the end of the day, in fact, if I had had the idea of what we're going to discuss here, maybe I would have researched to see what's happening.
Nothing
that
fundamentally has
translated to producing millionaires out of poverty-stricken people,
nothing.
or ameliorated some of the hardships that sparked off those protests. Unfortunately, I
Nothing
didn't.
fundamental has taken in those countries. I'm abreast of those issues.
So you see, Nigeria and other African countries, especially the West African countries where this thing is becoming pervasive now. I think the only language they understand might just be this.
Protest.
Okay, yeah, because the electoral system, unless there is massive reform there, the electoral system, and then a forceful judiciary too, reform that will ensure that the judiciary will hold their own, will hold their ground as the third, arm of government. Are you hearing me? Now, once that is done, not only in Nigeria, I teach a course at politics and law in Africa, and I know some of these things happening here. It's happening in Ghana, it's happening in Kenya, it's happening in many places. And then going by the fact that they were also, those countries I mentioned, Commonwealth countries, they have former colonies of Britain, as it were. So certainly certain rope tied them together. And I said, okay, if protests can't produce quality existence in those systems, what else can produce it? Military have tried their best. I think one of the ways would be look at the system that produces the leadership, because if the electoral system allows the people to vote in the person they like, and then when the person misbehaves, like is a case with Ruto, like he said, Ruto came on the heels of popularity. He was so popular. In fact, they adored him and worshiped as the Messiah, that they have lacked all these days, from the time of independence till now. And look at the way he fell. He fell massively. More than I'm sure the other day, the S1 leaders in that place were having a very good laugh, as well as the voters. So we expect them. Let's see how far the electoral system will be reformed. And the reformation should start with what is happening now. Protest, asking vehemently for a reform of the system, so that we'll be able to say, I am responsible for your coming into that seat. My vote must count, and how it will count is once you are not doing what you told me you're going to do there, I should also have the voice to tell you to step out of that place. But the way it is now, somebody has told you, for instance, using the Nigeria example, that no godfather funded my coming into this position. I have the resources. I funded myself. So I'm not answerable to you. Is that not what is happening? And the same thing, the same defiance is associated with, much of these other leaders that have brought so much pain through their very pernicious policies to their people. If you look at it, because I had to look at how did Ugandan president come on. He's been there for ages. He said, okay, the rumbles. You remember those were the days they fought against Idi Amin and so on and so forth. He said only him and his family and others know the kind of effort they put in place to bring forth democracy or the kind of freedom an average Ugandan is enjoying today.
Yeah.
And therefore they are born to rule that place till God comes down to say it's not, they should live there. It's all part of what we are seeing here now in Nigeria. It's not about saying I use my money to influence my own, election and so on and so forth. It could also be in the form of what the president of Uganda is saying, and so many others like that.
Okay. Now, Butako, you are
the electoral system, the reform must also be instigated by the voters, by the people.
All right. So, Butako, you are a conflict resolution expert. We are looking at alternatives to protest now. Apart from reforming the electoral system, which other ways do you think we can really use to hold our leaders, accountable in Africa?
Well, in conflict resolution, there are different layers. For instance, in a crisis situation, let me give an example of Liberia, for instance. When Liberia went to the grave, when everything collapsed, what we call in conflict resolution peace building, what we call peace building, what we call conflict transformation. You look at the conflict, the way it is, you transform it. How do you transform conflict? You use mechanism that generated the conflict. You use positive tools to transform the conflict.
Like what are the positive tools?
For instance, we're talking of the electoral system, because what we are practicing is Western liberal democracy.
Bad governance.
I'm coming.
Yeah.
What we have in Nigeria, in Africa, most African countries, Anglophone, Francophone, is Western liberal democracy, capitalism, and others. Delegated by force to Africa and Africans. And one of the easiest tools in transforming conflict, because Nigeria is in a conflict situation, most African countries are in a conflict situation. I don't educate Liberia, for instance. It was a peace building and conflict transformation that brought about the relative sanity we have in Liberia.
Yeah, when you say peace,
Look on Nigeria. We cannot run away from protests. It's a tool.
Is that the only tool?
It's not the only. Education is there, but we have stubborn leaders. Most of the leaders in Africa are stubborn. They are autocratic. They are vicious, anti-people who are not interested in good governance. It's so sad. Some people will tell you when we are talking about Museveni
of Uganda.
Museveni Yoweri. So I know Museveni Yoweri antecedent. Yoweri was a former guerrilla fighter.
Yes.
These are issues that are in our fingertips. Yoweri was a guerrilla guy. He was the one shouting from the bush that if I'm giving leadership, if I'm this, now he's life president. He has abandoned all what is promised to the people of Uganda. Now he's bringing his wife. He's bringing his son, sister, minister of this, minister of. I see insanity.
So are we saying that peace building is probably an alternative?
It's an alternative. Yeah. Okay, if you don't build peace, what do you do? That's the call in conflict resolution. So, but the people must be ready. The leadership must be ready.
Yeah, when you say
you cannot put a gun, for instance. Okay, for instance, the president just addressed the country yesterday morning. But what he told Nigerians, to many Nigerians is...
so in that situation, which can we say peace, peaceful resolution? I mean, the people are yearning for something.
They should come and negotiate.
Negotiate, I mean, is with that?
Negotiate with people that we know that are anti-people, because when talking about people, we know they are antecedent. I was trying to say, we know how the president came on board. The electoral system must They must be sanitized.
As an alternative.
It's an alternative, and these are the tools in conflict resolution, transformation, peace, and For instance, how do they elect? In Great Britain, some few weeks ago, saw the election that brought this guy, Starmer.
Yeah.
Within 24 hours, the political gas has changed. The man has entered 10 Downing Street. Because the system is transparent. The system is credible. The system is open. That's an open society. But in most of African countries, we don't have open society. We have one guy sitting at the one corner in presidential palace telling you who will be your next chairman. That is not what is obtainable in Europe and America. So talking about
alternatives,
we must do the needful. We cannot do outside what we cannot use tools, conflict transformation tools that is working elsewhere. We must make it work. How do we let it work? The people, the later will tell the people, I don't subscribe to violent protest. This is what one of the greatest apostles of conflict transformation in history did in India. Mahatma Gandhi, peaceful, non-violent demonstration. You sit down, nobody leaves you anywhere. Prof, if Nigerians sit down for 1 week, even without even coming out, the government will collapse. I'm telling you.
Yeah, but
because my daddy used to like that to bring down the British influence in India.
Yeah.
These are facts of the matter. These are historical facts.
Okay.
So now, in Nigeria, how do we transform conflict? We must ensure, Dr. Madan said, apart from one of the things we should do, we should hold government say, please, we don't want Mahmoud Yakubu should not stay 1 day younger as the next chairman. That is one of the process. Because what we are doing now is the generalized protest. That things are bad, people are hungry, people are impoverished, there's a poverty, people cannot eat. But the core, the kernel, that is bringing crisis, electoral process.
So we must reform the electoral process.
It's important to say.
There should be an arrangement. We must talk to the National Assembly.
Okay. All right. So
I dare Nigerian people to storm the National Assembly, not on violent conflict.
Let us be careful with that.
Peaceful now. They will go there. Yeah, the National Assembly. If you don't do some mechanisms, some clauses,
the arrangements.
We will. Okay. Now the man who presided over the worst election in Nigeria is still the next chairman.
Yeah, but let us be careful with the way we say the worst election.
This is a part of the matter.
Because some people, they won't look at it that way.
Why do you want to look at it? How do Nigeria want to look at it? Nigeria on the street. We thank God that God has placed some of us in a certain pedestal. We will not go hungry, madam.
Okay. Now, Prof, let me come to you now. Perhaps you have traveled far and wide, on the continent of Africa. Many times you've made, travels to Ghana, to Rwanda, and even in South Africa. Now, these three countries, most especially in Rwanda, we understand that most of their policies are people-based. Now, Paul Kagame may be a despot, the way some people qualify him. Maybe the way some people.
That's opinion.
The way some people.
We'll get there.
But even at that,
Prof, maybe you like him.
Okay,
not about
Prof, can I ask a question now? But even at that, most of his policies are people-based. I mean, immediately after the war, the idea that he was able to bring Rwandan citizens into one mindset, that the ethnicity that tears some nations apart, like Nigeria, is no more an issue. All these are some of the policies we're talking about. So in what ways do you think these African countries, in what ways are they doing, are they, going about their policies that other African countries and leaders need to learn from?
You see, I've been to Namibia. Sometimes when people make comparisons of happenings here vis-a-vis happenings in our SY colonial masters, England, I see you two go far. Or they make such comparison to sites in America, I say you two go far. Let's use Africa. Let's even start with Ghana. Honestly, I think the longest period I spent in Ghana was about 4 months. And within this 4 months, it's not as if I was even in the main capital city, Accra. I was in a community that looked more like where I am in Auchi there.
Yeah.
Okay, or Benin City. Yeah, okay. So, and light was constant. And when I heard that they even buy the electricity, it has become constant to the citizens there from Nigeria. I say, wow. So why is it that what we say we cannot make it constant? That's one question I want to leave behind to you and maybe listeners out there. Now, let's move on. Let me go to Cote d'Ivoire, because leaving Ghana, I went to Cote d'Ivoire. I went to a city called Daloa, which is not even Abidjan, the capital. Which another maybe a regional capital like we have here.
Yeah.
Daloa, electricity is constant. Cost of living. I even called my cousin. I said, what is the size? What is the price of bread? Those they are dry francophone type of bread. How much? Honestly, the increment is not up to 20%. Almost how many years after I left that place? Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. Now, I left that place. I've been to, of course, I schooled in Namibia. So now, having lived to about almost 2 years in Namibia, these African countries, Nigeria assisted in their independence struggles. Now, Namibia, when the loaf of bread moved from the average size of loaf of bread that an average family there buys, it's just something like this. What will now buy for about 1,000?
2,000.
For instance, here now, the size I bought is so light now. If you squeeze it, my 2-year-old daughter, 1 year can finish it.
Yeah.
Now, that size of loaf, I asked my friend there, I said, how much is that bread now? Honestly, as at the time I left there in 2016, January.
The increment.
The increment from then to now, that's about 8 years.
Yeah.
It's just from $6, that's Namibian dollars.
Yeah.
It's now about $7.5. Honestly, you can't. At least Tony just arrived there now, relocated with his family to that place. So what's happening? Can you say that about Nigeria? No. These are African countries, for crying out loud, where we are saying, generalizing that the system of governance, or maybe the system that even joins out these government officials, that's the leaders, seem to have the corrupt as it is in Nigeria. But somehow, they give it a human face. They give their own system a human face by making sure that, yes, you get enough as a leader, but for Christ's sake, make sure something trickles down the line to the poverty-stricken citizens you've come on board to lead. An average Namibian can afford to buy chicken and eat. When I was there, whenever I said students in the evening, most of the retail shops will sell off, from the grocery units, where these fries are sold. You could go there and buy enough to keep till tomorrow, maybe the next day. In fact, it was there I know that when some Bible sections I read will say, when I came to your house, you didn't give me meat to eat. And I begin to wonder, how can meat fill your tummy, There, they serve you meat as meal and a bucket of milk or whatever to go with it.
In Namibia.
And that's okay. This is it.
This is what they
This is what they saw. Those people eat meat as food.
Yeah.
And I asked her, do you proceed? So you say, yes, whatever you can afford, at least you eat, because that's their meal. So what I'm saying is, yes, the leadership might not be as perfect as what you have in Europe and America and those, but they give it human face.
Yeah.
They make sure that an average human being can afford to eat and eat well. Cost of food is still as stable as ever in Namibia, almost 8 years after I left there. Now let's go to Rwanda, where I was there 2019, 2020. Okay?
Yeah.
Rwanda, yes, they just had their election. Why would you want to throw away a leader that has lifted many of you out of poverty, that has restored hope that was destroyed, more or less, that has brought quality infrastructure in place, that has elevated the women to a dizzying height that other democracies around the world are looking up to? Even America is about possibly installing their first woman president. But yeah, Rwanda has not done that.
Yeah.
But an average Rwandan woman, especially given the fact that measurement of a country's development is often as a result done in accordance with the number of women in their
parliament.
legislature.
Yeah.
Now, that country is the model for the rest of the world. My brother, I'm sure you know that.
I know.
More than the percentage of women in the legislative arm of government in Rwanda is about, it went from 50%, that's 50 women, 50 men, to now about 61%.
61%.
Yes, very high.
Against the men.
Yes. And that's because they don't even care. The husbands are there supportive. Nobody is there to bring down anybody. And it's all because of the leadership. The kind of leadership, exemplary leadership provided by Paul Kagame and his team. People are fired up to work for the country.
Yeah.
They believe in their country. So when you see the election highly in his favor, for Christ's sake, people were speaking genuinely, not because some guns were being pointed at us. If you do otherwise, you are gone. No.
All right, so Nowita Gutaka, we have about 2 more minutes on the show. So what are your last
Quickly,
words? Yeah.
I want to disagree with Madam briefly. To me, Kagame is a monster in terms of human rights.
But we didn't see that in the election.
I'm coming because when we talk of democracy, you cannot. The democracy is supposed to be an open society, because that is what is happening in America now. That is why when they brought Kamala Harris to replace Biden, so that to counter Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Because Donald Trump is an authoritarian guy. He's somebody that can close some liberties, that can manipulate the situation in America. He's part of the democratic arrangement in America. So what I'm trying to make is that good, Kagame has provided leadership in Rwanda, but that country is not an open society.
In terms of human rights,
Human rights and
issues.
Do you know what happened before the elections? People did not have the right to even campaign. Somebody that was even popular, that was trying to come up, a lady, I can't get the name now. The lady was that was a lot of frustration.
All right.
Before the matter that Kagame provided leadership.
I told you.
Yeah, but because of time, we don't, Prof, we don't have time. We have less than 1 minute.
That will not close the society.
No, we are not saying that. That's not what I'm saying.
In as much as, because my background having not to the civil society, we see these things. I know, give it to Kagame. He has done wonders.
But in terms of human rights,
work and open that society.
It depends on the
we end this discussion today. I want to say a very big thank you to Professor Mrs. Florence Masajinwa, a professor of law and of course a lecturer. Thank you so much for finding time to join us today after so many invites that we extended to you. Thanks so much, madam.
I'm grateful.
All right, you're welcome. And also Nowita Butako is serial author and an international conflict resolution expert. Nowita, thank you so much for finding time to join us. All right, so we just hope and pray that African leaders will hear some of the solutions, that we suggested here today in terms of alternative to conflict. We talked about the need to rebuild our electoral system and also the judicial system. So those are the two key things that we mentioned here today. Until the same time on the same program, Africa Discourse on Independent Television. My name is Evan Sunohuge. Bye-bye and God bless you.